Welcome to the worst platformer game, a brand new series where I try to chase the high that platformers like Mario and Sonic gave me back in the day by inspecting the best and the worst indie-developed platformers. Today we're analyzing a game called Demon Turf, a 3D platformer set in the underworld where our main character, Beebs, has the ultimate goal of taking down the Demon King. Let's get into it. The beginning of the game starts out with a tutorial sequence teaching you about the different kinds of movement you can use to your advantage in this game. Immediately we're stopped by the Demon King on a TV screen, talking smack to us and explaining that we're communicating in a dream sequence. Beebs tells the Demon King that she will sit on his throne someday, and he laughs at the thought. Moving on to the movement, I noticed I had a lot of control over my character because it's not a momentum-based movement game. Movement is precise and snappy, with changes in direction being instantly responsive even when air strafing. Beebs doesn't really have any weight to her movements. This isn't Super Mario 64, where Mario's acceleration and deceleration is slower and heavy when moving around. Beebs instantly snaps to where you're inputting, allowing for precise platforming and more difficult level design. The tutorial teaches us about our basic run and jump, but there's also a double jump where you turn into this tiny red demon and gain more height. Then the game tossed me straight into some water where Beebs transforms into a little squid demon, and by holding right trigger, I can zoom around like a submarine. We learn about wall jumps, of course, and then we're taught about the flutter ability. By holding left trigger, Beebs will turn into this propeller demon and gain a slight glide before slowly plummeting straight downwards. Now, I struggled a bit with this ability because in my head, I expected to be able to glide in a downwards arc and maintain some speed and flow to my movement. But this ability kinda just gives you that extra bit of distance before killing your momentum and dropping you straight down. And something a bit tricky about this game's controls is that sometimes if you commit to a movement option and Beebs transforms into a demon, you're stuck in that demon form until you hit the ground. It's a selective restriction where sometimes you're locked into a demon form and sometimes you can act out of it. Let me explain. We know that I can double jump and become the little red demon and then flutter afterwards and transform into the purple demon, right? Okay, cool. Now the next movement option we learn about in the tutorial is the super jump. Essentially this game's version of a long jump. The move is done by single jumping and then fluttering and jumping out of the flutter, which causes Beebs to front flip through the air with great speed and horizontal movement. But something the game doesn't allow you to do is perform a super jump after double jumping, even though we can still flutter after double jumping. It's a weird stipulation and one that took some getting used to. It basically made my brain have to lock off double jumping in a lot of scenarios. And double jumping is often an instinctual input when trying to clear platforming gaps, so a lot of times I would double jump, realize I should have super jumped, and then be caught in no man's land and end up falling to my death. This definitely took some getting used to. It was like a memorization test sometimes. While trying to move fast and freely, oftentimes I would forget that this chain of movement was restricted, which felt uncomfortable to me, because usually in a 3D platformer, the freedom of your movement options adds to the beauty and flow that these games aim to utilize to satisfy the player. Just look at the movement of something like Super Mario Odyssey. You have a very free movement toolkit with very limited restrictions, giving the player a lot of creative ways to move about the levels. So this made me super frustrated in my first session of the game. Another example of movement restrictions comes later on when we unlock more abilities, which for the most part mesh well with our base kit, except for the grappling hook ability, which is another movement option that isn't able to be used after a double jump. Like when I first unlocked the grappling hook, there were so many times where I double jumped and then couldn't grapple out of it and I just fell to my death. I can maybe understand why they restricted super jumping out of a double jump because you could potentially gain too much height and distance at the same time, which could render too much of their level design skippable, but if that's the case, then why not give the player more satisfying movement and design around it? What I really can't understand though is the reasoning behind why I can't grapple out of a double jump. That one doesn't feel like I gain or lose any major design breaking advantages, so I was a little frustrated at times with the movement option restrictions. But before I get ahead of myself, this frustration was only early on and it was minor. It wasn't a total deal breaker. It for sure felt unnatural for the first few hours, but I got used to it. Moving forward, super jumping is how you will be getting around quickly in this game. Like I said, it's this game's long jump. The running speed of Beebs is just too slow to get around, so for the rest of the game, you're gonna see me spamming left trigger and A to go as quickly as I can through the levels. The next element of the tutorial taught me about turf claiming. Basically, you can set your own checkpoints throughout the levels to teleport to. So if you die, you now have a new respawn point deeper into the level. You get 3 flags to place, and honestly, it's a super useful feature, if you can remember to use it. The first world of this game was rough for me. I essentially never remembered to place checkpoints because I was never expecting to fail. Pair this with trying to get used to not being able to act out of double jump, and I was making a lot of frustrating mistakes that were resetting me all the way back to the beginning of the level. However, in between my first and second recording sessions, I reminded myself of this feature and started to implement it, which made beating levels so much quicker. Essentially, if the section ahead looks dangerous, just drop a flag, bro. It's another design choice that sets the game apart from similar titles in the genre, which isn't a bad thing. As an indie developer, you want to be bold and make your game stand out. I get that, but I just don't understand the why aspect. Why make your player learn and adapt and teach themselves to place their own checkpoints? To me, the player, this feature has a lot of pros and cons, but what matters is how this feature affects the player's ability to achieve their goals in playing this game. My goal personally when I play a 3D platformer is to be captivated by the satisfaction of the relationship between these awesome environments or level design and the fast and free-flowing movement. Movement restrictions and manually placing checkpoints just kind of made me remove myself from that goal and made me think too much about failing and resetting back to the beginning of the level, which of course is always a threat in any platformer. But sometimes I died some cheap deaths and forgot to place a checkpoint. Then I would need to angrily make my way back through the same level to try that obstacle again. I think the difference here is in the level design and implementation of something like a health bar. In 3D Mario, most levels are not linear and give you a big sandbox with many stars hidden in that sandbox. There's not a lot of open pits or one-shot kills that could frustratingly send you back to the start all too often. And even the stars that are the farthest away from the respawn point aren't that big of an issue because you'll be dying a lot less in those games due to being able to take multiple hits on a refillable health bar. The frustration chances are low, and the game ramps up that difficulty once you're already hooked on the game. In Demon Turf, the level design has death pits everywhere, and a lot of the enemies and obstacles are red, which means it'll one-shot kill Beebs. So if you forget to place a checkpoint and get one-shotted because you were focusing on the flow of this game's movement because that is the satisfying part to the player, tough luck, kiddo. Back to the bottom. Look, it's not an overall bad feature. It definitely had its advantages. Like in some non-linear levels, I could place a checkpoint at the level exit and then dive back down for all the collectibles I missed. Then once I collected everything, I could teleport straight to the end. But for the actual linear level designs, for which most of this game's levels will be, just give me predetermined checkpoints, man. This feature caused more frustration than it provided usefulness, and didn't really mesh well with the linear design, one-shot health situation, and precision platforming gameplay. But regardless, back to the tutorial, we're then taught about the combat in this game. By pressing or holding right trigger, Beebs will throw demon hands that push and stun enemies. By holding down the trigger, you can charge it up to get a stronger push, or spam the trigger to chain a bunch of tiny pushes. The punches can even deflect bullets. Most of the combat boils down to pushing enemies into spikes or off ledges while avoiding one-shot attacks, but they do give you the option of hitting enemies with fluttering to stun them, and also jumping on their heads to stun them. After collecting our third tutorial cake, which will be the collectibles for half this game's levels, we're taunted by the Demon King once more before entering the spiral-looking portal gate and finishing the tutorial. We're treated to a short cutscene where Beebs talks about how the demon world is separated into turfs run by gang leaders who are all too weak to challenge the Demon King themselves. Beebs also tells us how she's going to be the one to take him down, and then we wake up. We're met by Midgie, our turtle friend? We tell him about our dream encounter with the Demon King, and Midgie is on board with our plan to take him down. The first gang we will be challenging is from what's called the Apoca Desert, and Midgie points us in the direction of how to get there. I don't know if I just wasn't paying attention, or if everything in this purple misty town just looks too similar, but I immediately got distracted. Beebs' house is at the bottom of this town, and the castle gate with our next objective to progress is tucked to the side of the town square on the top layer of the city. So basically, before I found that, I went and explored practically the entire town. First, I entered this arcade, where this apathetic upside-down skeleton man greeted me. All the arcade machines were off, and the skeleton man says we can collect game cartridges hidden across town to turn the games back on, which I proceeded to keep an eye out for while I explored more. I found this Demon King resistance hideout where the leader will sell us batteries for sweets. And looking around the bottom layer of this town, I found 2 game cartridges and headed right back to the arcade. Loading up the first game, it was immediately clear that this was the first Bowser level from Super Mario 64. And loading up the second cartridge, I quickly realized that this was one of the Super Mario Sunshine stages where Flood gets stolen. I appreciated this gag of nostalgia, but in an effort to progress, I moved on from the arcade. I found this mummy guy who sells badges that give us more movement abilities, but being broke, I couldn't buy anything yet. And to be honest, I forgot about this place and never came back here to equip anything. I walked past this stage that apparently hosts soccer golf, but this wasn't unlocked yet. I talked to these ladies who were too obsessed with social media followers to care about me, and then I went into this photography hut where this totally not a human NPC will give me quests to take photos of things to gain more sweets. There's this squid named Frankie who will change our look for a price. There's the arena where you can fight and earn more sweets. I found a pet store, and then I found this candy man who gives us platforming challenges to complete for more sweets. How many damn extra tasks are there in this game? I've wandered this town for 30 minutes and have found hours and hours of content before even finding the real levels. I appreciate the amount of things to do and the clear love that was put into the design and the content of this game, but at least like slowly unlock it as we go, or give it to the player as post-game content. I just loaded into this world, and before I even know what the structure of the game looks like, I'm being overwhelmed with extracurriculars. I don't know, maybe it's me and the guidance from Midgie missed me completely, but the Demon King's castle doesn't stick out enough as the clear place to go as the newborn player. By the time I finally found the levels, I was overwhelmed with all the content I was offered in the hub world. It's like the game is love bombing me with content before it even won me over. I can obviously see and appreciate the love and effort that they put into making all these bonus levels and features, but it just feels like the experience needs more early game pacing and guidance to hook the player in, instead of overstimulating them. On the bridge to the castle, we're stopped by a demon girl named Lucy. Beebs speaks to her as a friend, and when she mentions the Demon King dream, Lucy panics, asking what the boss said to her. After explaining it was a dream, Lucy calms down, and then sarcastically wishes Beebs good luck on her adventure and points us to the spiral portal leading to the first area, the Apoca Desert. The desert area is a Mad Max-style wasteland town of pig-like demons run by this giant pig demon named Fredo. Jumping into the first level here, allow me to describe this game's structure. The Demon King's castle is locked, and we need 50 batteries to enter the portal and challenge the final boss. Each level rewards us with 1 battery for completing it, and each world starts out with 7 levels, all containing 3 cake collectibles to find. After beating all 7 levels, you can challenge the turf boss, which gives you a new item to fight the boss with. Beating the boss makes Beebs the turf leader of the world, but also changes the state of the area. In doing so, all 7 levels reopen with a new objective in the same maps, just sometimes the level design will be slightly different or completely altered. However, instead of cakes being the extra collectible, now it'll be 50 lollipops as your new extra objective. Kind of a Banjo-Kazooie music notes type situation. So that means each of the 4 worlds has 14 levels that all contain a battery to collect, meaning you need to beat 50 out of 56 levels to gain enough batteries to challenge the Demon King. But don't worry about wandering around like a headless chicken if you're struggling to find a collectible. If you click in the left stick, an arrow will pop up above Beebs' head, pointing you in the direction of the closest objective, making gathering all the sweets a pretty relaxing task in figuring out how to get each one. The levels in this game, with a few exceptions, are pretty fun to navigate, and they're paired with plenty of great area-themed tracks that make you nod your head while you're cruising along. Apart from just the normal platforming, the game has combat zones where you need to kill all the enemies to progress the level, collection zones where you need to collect a bunch of keys to progress, race zones where you need to reach the finish line fast enough, ring zones where you need to jump through all the hoops, and curse zones, which have the gimmick of restricting your movement once you enter the portal. But once you complete the curse zone and come out the other side, you're teleported to a new section of the level. The Apoca Desert as the first world had the most simple levels out of the 4 turfs. It had me navigating through farmlands, mining zones, and old treasure fortresses that a baron would have ruled back in the day. Each level in the desert had a linear level design. My personal favorite was this tower level, where you're breaking into the treasure vault with all the gems in it. It really felt like a complete story in this level, where you easily break into the fortress and then go to the vault entrance where these bozo guards tell you about the treasure behind the big vault door. And then, platforming to the top and infiltrating the vault full of gems was a fun idea. My least favorite level was this mining canyon. This is a level where the early frustrations we talked about were really pissing me off. I wasn't putting down checkpoints, so falling down the giant vertical canyon and resetting me back to the beginning of the level was pissing me off a lot. The last level that I found interesting was the Mad Scientist level, where throughout the level you're going in and out of different buildings, seeing different experiments that this mad scientist is performing. But after beating the first 7 levels, I was finally able to fight the boss. Fighting Fredo unlocked the grappling hook item. Basically, by pressing right bumper, we could hook shot to these bars and ascend to greater heights. But also, we could hook enemies and certain objects with it too, helping with combat and weight puzzles. Boss fights in this game come in 3 phases that give you auto checkpoints for completing each phase. I'm not even gonna say anything about that one. Fredo's phases involve hookshotting his gauntlets off when he smashes the ground with them. Once one gauntlet is pulled off, he will start breaking the arena and moving around, giving you less space to dodge attacks and less space to rip the other gauntlet off. Phase 3 involves pushing away pig enemies and dodging missiles until Fredo reaches your small platform. He will smash the ground out from under you, so you'll need to grappling hook away before he destroys the platform. Then on the 3rd platform, Fredo will start assembling a giant scrap ball to kill you with, so you need to grappling hook and jump up towards him to reach the ball and hook it down on top of his head to kill him. It was here where I frustratingly realized double jump grappling hook doesn't work, which killed me in the final moments. But after dying a bunch, I finally took down Fredo. Overall, not a bad first boss fight. I was dying a lot and getting frustrated, but it was definitely more of a skill issue for this time around. Killing Fredo makes Beebs the leader of the Apoca Desert, and after exiting the boss battle, Lucy is there to greet us. She sarcastically congratulates us and downplays our accomplishment of beating Fredo and exits the conversation laughing at us. Okay, rude. The Apoca Desert is now covered in a sandstorm, and here it was revealed to me that I just re-unlocked all 7 levels again, which kinda pissed me off. But once I realized the levels were altered with new design, I got over it and kept on enjoying the game. Nothing really too different here. A lot of the levels, since they're mostly linear small maps, had minor changes that incorporated the grappling hook into the level design. The vault was now flooded with water, and the Mad Scientist labs were flooded with lava. But after collecting all 14 batteries for the Apoca Desert, I moved on to the next area, the Armageddon Zone. The Armageddon Zone is a beach theme zone that, for the demon world, was surprisingly lovely. It makes me question why this area wasn't put first, because it was was by far my favorite aesthetic. The boss of this area is a crab with an industrial factory for a shell, named Captain Damp. He rules over these crab demons in the seaside domain with a new tropical-themed soundtrack accompanying the levels. Most of the levels are set in a beautiful sunny island universe surrounded by the open ocean. Naturally, there's a lot of swimming portions, but as I went on, the theme had a shift. Some levels departed from the natural tropical beauty and introduced dark, gloomy factories that had enemies that could poison you. There were even portions where you had to quickly swim through poison water before it killed you. The poison was pretty weak, to be honest, considering if you're on land, you can just spam flutter to unpoison yourself. But it's still cool to see new mechanics and level design being added as the game progresses. That is one major strength this game offers. As the areas become more complex and you get more abilities to use, the game does a really good job at making you use your full kit to its extent, and evolving its level design as you go. Apart from the poison factory, this turf had many memorable levels here, including some with non-linear design. In this level, your goal is to explore a group of islands to collect all the keys and unlock the path to the exit, making the game less of a raw platformer and more of a fun exploration level, which was a great change of pace from World 1, and I'm happy that there's some variety in how each level is completed. One of my favorite levels in the whole game was this level, where you climb up the side of a giant set of volcanoes, which made the image of entering this cave and ending up inside the largest volcano burn into my brain. Just don't forget to place your checkpoints on this one. I really like the level where you raise the water with you as you climb. The water rising creates yourself more paths to traverse vertically, which was honestly a really great idea. And then this giant waterfall level with Midgey's office space was cool too. The ocean world was easily the most entertaining area in the game. Entering the boss arena, we're granted the ability to turn to the snake-like demon and become a wheel, rolling around at top speeds with our turning radius limited by the pace of the camera. This allows us to drive up slopes that previously we would slide down, but also go fast in a straightish line to get past these new falling platforms before it drops us to our death. The fight against Captain Damp is a pretty simple battle. What you need to do is deflect bullets back into him to fill up his exhaustion meter, and then when he's all tired out, get behind him and hit his bandaged butt off the stage. He will then get angry and change forms, and you will need to chase after him using the new rollout ability to keep up. He evolves from standard blue knockback bullets to poison bullets to insta-kill lava bullets until you knock him off 3 times and win. Doing this will now make Beebs the leader of the islands and change the world from a sunny paradise to a bleak and stormy setting. Captain Damp was a decent boss fight. It was pretty cool and I had no issues trying to take him down. Exiting the boss fight, we meet Lucy again, and she is upset with us. She tells us we're causing too much trouble and that the Demon King is furious. Beebs says that she thought Lucy would be rooting for her, but Lucy makes it known that she isn't and storms off. To be honest, Lucy's just gonna have to hold that. Jumping back into all 7 levels, apart from the world being stormy, the level switched it up pretty well, with the coolest changes being this level, which replaced the ocean of water with an ocean of lava. And then, the level with the rising water instead became rising death lasers, which also was a fun switch up. Other than that, we had some alterations to the linear design that incorporated our new rollout ability, but after rolling on through the second half of the levels, it was safe to say that the Armada Gevin world was a fantastic area all around. Moving on to World 3, we're heading to New Neo City. The leader of New Neo City is this owl duo. The main one is named Tomo, and she rules over the bird demons that populate the city. The city itself is gloomy and dark, but the settings take place on the tops of buildings with billboards, neon signs, corner stores, subways, cars, and plenty of construction sites to platform through during the levels. This world didn't really do it for me. With the exception of one level, the levels go fully back into linear level design with a lot of combat zones, the new curse zones, and just flat out being longer. A lot of them lack atmosphere, apart from being on rooftops above the distant city below. There was even one level where I ran into the issue of placing down all 3 of my checkpoint flags too early, and then because of this, I had to one-shot all these curse zones in order to reach the top of this tower and finally complete the level. It was super frustrating. There were 3 levels here besides this green misty tower level that stuck out to me. One is this racetrack level, which is fully linear and makes use of the rollout ability really well by sticking you in race zones. You have to make it to the end of the track quick enough to progress through the level. Great idea that fits the theme of the zone, but not my favorite execution of this concept. Like, imagine if it was actual street races with other NPCs and cars, and while you're zooming at lightning fast speeds, you have to dodge obstacles and catch up to the first place position to complete the level on actual city streets. Now that would be awesome. Another level that stuck out was this non-linear level that takes place in a couple blocks of a floating city they designed. Now this is pretty cool, and I enjoyed exploring the cityscape, but after a short amount of time, it just feels like there's not enough moving parts or walks of life here that could make the level feel truly alive. Now, this feels like an unfair comparison, but the only thing I can think of that captures a city world in a 3D platforming extremely well is New Donk City from Odyssey. It really gives you a floating city that feels like it's bustling with life, while still being bite-sized enough to make sense as a 3D platforming level. This city level ended up becoming stale real fast, as I just became agitated that it took so long to find all 3 cakes and find the lever to open up the exit. But my real favorite level of this area was the subway level. Platforming and doing combat on a fast-moving train and then transferring to another train on a parallel rail was insanely cool, and this perfectly captures some of that imaginative design potential that a cityscape area can possess. Easily the coolest level in the area. But once again, after completing the first 7 levels, it was boss fight time. Fighting the boss rewards us with this bird demon ability, where we can essentially now glide for real. Think of Spyro's glide ability, where you get a lot of horizontal distance while losing a slight amount of vertical distance, allowing you to soar over a large gap. In phase 1, you fight Gozen, the little minion that sits on Tomo's head. He wields a gun that shoots blue knockback bullets. To kill him, all you need to do is hit him a bunch to exhaust him while he teleports away and clones himself, and then, once he's exhausted, knock him off the edge. Then you'll be swept up into the air and forced to glide to the next battle arena while dodging red lasers by maneuvering your flight path. In phase 2, you will fight Tomo alone, as she uses wind and charges you to try to knock you off the edge. The same strategy applies here. You just need to punch her a lot until she's exhausted and then knock her off the edge. One more flight sequence, and then phase 3 makes you fight them both at the same time, but this time there are walls surrounding the arena. But all you have to do is simply hit the bosses into the red laser parts of the wall to kill them, and then boom, New Neo City is now under Beebs' control. Probably my least favorite boss fight. It didn't really add anything new. It was kind of exactly like the Captain Damp fight, just with flight instead of rolling, which honestly made it so much easier. Exiting the fight, Lucy doesn't show up, and Beebs is a little upset to not see her friend. But Midgie comforts Beebs and ushers her to keep on moving. New Neo City in its second state becomes a winter wonderland, with snow and ice now covering the previous levels. As always, the new level design makes use of the new glide ability, but there's nothing much to say about these second state levels. They're all pretty linear, just now having some glide sections and a lot of ice. The train level is now stationary, which was pretty lame, and the city level is now just a collectathon of 8 keys. But I completed all 7 levels and moved on to the final area, the Peak Plateau. This final world was a mountaintop themed area with the domain being dominated by these 2 ancient divine stone snake golems. Their names are Go and Lem. Seriously, Go and Lem? Real creative guys. And their robotic nature rules over the Peak Plateau like gods. This area was probably my second favorite behind the beach world. Each level takes place on the peaks of snowy mountains, peering through the clouds, decorated with lots of temple-like structures that monks might have lived in the Himalayas of Nepal. Except instead of monks, it's these temple golem type enemies. The demon NPCs in this area are also golems, they just don't have any interest in killing you. The levels in this area are so grand, and now with your glide ability, it gives the levels the freedom to stretch out a bit more. I mean, compare these levels to the Apoca Desert levels, they're 10 times as big. The most memorable levels here have to be the ski slope level with the chairlifts, this giant mountain cave level with upside down temple buildings, and this giant non-linear level with this incredibly tall tower in the middle. Amazingly large scale levels that really make you feel like you're at the tallest point in the demon world. And once again, after completing the first 7 levels, it was time to fight the golem snakes. This boss fight was fucking annoying. The ability acquired here before the fight is a time-stopping orb. By using this ability, you can charge up a pink orb and then fire it. By remote detonating it, it creates a time-slowing field that changes in size depending on how much you charged it up. But not only does it slow down objects and enemies, it even slows down your movements. So going into the fight, we're standing on the golem snake's body as it's flying through the air. The 2-headed snake will start attacking us by spawning in icicles or shooting a giant fucking one-shot laser that covers half the snake's body. So while you're platforming, you're listening to sound cues to hear which snake voice is charging up the laser so that you can move to the opposite side of the snake's body to dodge it. Also, plenty of these platforms are moving incredibly fast, so you need to charge up your time-slowing ability to slow them down. But charging this ability takes so damn long, it's ridiculous. There's legit no need for it to be this slow. It changes nothing other than making you less mobile while the snakes are trying to eviscerate you. Just about every time I used this ability, it was charged to full blast. So why do we even need to charge it up? Just make it one button press. Not to mention, in a flowy movement precision platformer kind of game, it just kind of kills all your flow. Plus, you need to self-detonate it, and trying to judge depth for the slow orb to be in the middle of where the platform is rapidly moving is a pain in the ass. I died so many times trying to use this slow orb and getting tripped up by Beebs also moving slowly in the force field. It just felt like an uncomfortable implementation for this kind of mechanic. But after many deaths, I made it to the top platform to fight the snakes. To kill the snakes, all you have to do is punch their own bomb-hand enemies back into their head or necks to damage them. Once you hit both snakes enough, the fight is over and Beebs becomes the leader of the Peak Plateau. An awesome area let down by a gimmick ability boss fight. The setting is cool and all, but I just don't think an ability where you have to stop and charge up a time-slowing orb works in a free-flowing precision platformer. The 3 previous abilities work great because they all have something to do with giving you more movement options, but the time orbs ain't it. Exiting the boss fight, the Peak Plateau is now covered in a blizzard, and Lucy is there asking if Beebs and her can talk in private back in town. But first, time for the second half levels of the Peak Plateau. Okay, admittedly, I only did one because all I needed was one more battery to hit 50 and open up the Demon King's castle. I knew these second half levels were going to make me use the time ability more, so I just decided to move on and go to the final boss. Back at the castle, all 4 of the turf bosses have gathered around the castle gates to root for us to take down the Demon King. It seems instead of killing them, we just kinda earn their respect by winning the duel and becoming the leader of their turfs. Inside the castle walls, Lucy greets us and apologizes for being a bad friend and not believing in Beebs. Beebs is flustered by this and accepts her apology. Apart from Lucy, Midgie, and the bosses looking on through the window of the castle, we find the tutorial level, which is now available to be replayed. There's also a vault that shows tallies on a board that insinuate once you complete 100% of the game, the vault doors will open. Through the locked vault doors, there is a portal, so there must be some kind of bonus level? Eventually, I might go back and 100% the game. But if there's anyone watching this that knows what's in the 100% vault, feel free to leave me a comment down below, because I'd love to know. And while you're at it, hit subscribe! The last 2 things inside the castle are a playable level and the Demon King boss fight that is locked behind bars, so the only thing to do was to head into the level. This level is a classic trope in video games where they give you a culmination of everything you've learned during the playthrough. It makes use of all our precision platforming abilities and all our newly acquired boss abilities, all while guiding us up a linear designed level over a giant death pit set inside a Demon King tornado. But again, I kinda just blasted through this level with basically no trouble at all. I was hoping for an epic and difficult final tower to really challenge me and build the climax of the game before the fight, kind of like the Bowser levels in Super Mario Galaxy before you fight him. But even if you think those Super Mario Galaxy levels are easy, at least it's building tension to a climax. You see, in terms of difficulty, I never really found any of the platforming all that difficult in this game, with the only things really tripping me up being one-shot death kills or the movement restrictions we talked about earlier. While the movement was really fun and precise, the difficulty doesn't scale to make the most of it. The level designs and areas became more fun and complex for sure, which was good. But in terms of fun, free-flowing platforming, there was a ton of potential here, but it never really lived up to that potential. This final climb didn't really build any tension for me and was just a buffer between the peak plateau and the Demon King fight. However, before we get into the final fight, I do have to applaud the developers and give credit where credit is due. The sign of a good developer is learning from your shortcomings and adapting in future developments. And by God, have they done just that. I talked about wanting to move fast and freely throughout my playthrough and the level design not making the most of that. So what do? The devs made Demon Turf Neon Splash. This short DLC gives all new linear levels in a vaporwave neon paint splash aesthetic world where a lot of Beebs' movement is improved by what feels like 1.5x speed. The levels have collectibles, but then the remixed versions of each level are all just about speed. No collectibles, no bullshit, just fast-flowing linear design that works brilliantly with Beebs' movement kit. I was genuinely having a blast flying around these new levels, all while vibing to the new drum and bass soundtrack. Very awesome addition to the game. But that's not even it. I was just now complaining about none of the platforming being hard enough, right? So what did the devs do? They released another game mode called the Demon Turf Tower. This free DLC is a Fadian map. The story shows us that a jester has stolen Beebs' entire movement kit, and you must climb the tower to get it back. As you climb, you gain back more of your abilities, and the tower is designed around that. Falling off a floor plummets you vertically downwards towards previous floors below, just like something along the lines of Bait and Brutal. You climb up a tower of 50 floors to regain your abilities. It takes the movement kits of Beebs and fully pushes it to its limits, challenging the player. My only issue with it is the existence of one-shot kill moves. This is a gimmicky mechanic usually unseen in Fadians, and in this case, dying on a red spike resets you all the way back to the beginning. And while this does provide an answer for my desire to be challenged using Beebs' movement kit, this is like going from 0 to 100. I have not beaten the map, but I applaud the developers for their efforts. They really made a collectathon, a free-flowing movement game, and a Fadian using the same universe and assets.
It is a little something for everyone.
But enough glazing, back to the main game for the final showdown. The final boss fight versus the Demon King starts in epic fashion, but really falls flat in terms of the actual fight. Entering the fight, the Demon King is this huge floating being with giant glowing hands whose first phase tactic is to fight us using shadow clones of all the previous 4 bosses from before. So nothing really new to explain here. All you need to know is that you need to punch the white stars on their shadow bodies to hurt the Demon King. In phase 2 of the fight, he makes himself into a shadow clone of Beebs and fights you head to head with your own abilities against you. Except by just running at him and spamming punch, he kinda just can't get any attacks off and you can push him into the red lasers over and over again. I mean, just listen to this audio. For phase 3, it's pretty much the same thing. I don't actually know the difference between phase 2 and 3. He seemed to get more attacks off and do more knockback to me, but it was still just the same Beebs versus a Shadow Clone fight where I spammed punches until the Demon King was dead. It just felt a bit silly and anticlimactic to me. Defeating the Demon King ends with him exploding and returning to his true form. A mummy kid? As it turns out, Beebs knows the kid from town, and he took on this form as the Demon King in an elaborate ruse to lure Beebs here and become her friend. Beebs ends up inviting him over to her place to play some video games, and just like that, we have a wholesome ending of our 4 friends playing video games as credits roll. Look, I can't dog on a wholesome ending. It's nice, it's happy, they become friends, it's great, but man is it anticlimactic. Overall, I enjoyed my time with this game. I think it suffers from some issues, but the overall design has a lot of solid things going for it. But the lack of challenging platforming in a game that controls like a precision platformer, but treats itself like it's Super Mario Sunshine mixed with Spyro, really threw my mind in a lot of directions that gave me a ton of highs and lows when playing it. But before we wrap this video up, as we're starting a new series here, I wanted to give each game a ranking and start a little ranking board of sorts. So without further ado, our first score of the worst platformer series for Demon Turf is 7 out of 10. Not too shabby. Demon Turf is a fun experience that's a bit rough around the edges and lacking at times, but I still enjoyed it nonetheless, and I think it's worth playing. And hey, if you like collectathons, there's plenty of extra quests to do to open that 100% vault. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on The Worst Platformer.